I just wanted to say thank you so much for taking some time to do this interview. I'm actually really excited to learn more about you and your art.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate you having me. I haven't actually done an interview kind of like this for a while. I did one for my for the school paper at my college, like freshman year, I think. But that was like a pretty small article, and that was a while ago, and it was in person. So I haven't
Okay.
done like a video interview style thing before, so it's a new thing for me.
Yeah, cool. So just to start off, I'd love for you to talk about the type of art you do and what you mainly do.
Okay, so I actually got since I'm back in my house due to the very long winter break that we got, I got the chance to look at some of my old artwork that from when I was really young, and then when I started doing art again in high school. So what happened was I did a lot of art between like the ages of 5 and 9, and then I stopped doing it between then and like halfway through high school. I picked up again by doing like basic illustration, like copying a lot of images from like comic books and like cartoons online and stuff like that, just to really get control of my hand so I could copy things well. I feel like that was a necessary first step. Then, ironically enough, even though I'm not going to an art school, I was taking a painting class because I'm at a liberal arts school and I wanted to fulfill an art requirement and something that I thought would be like an interesting exploration. I started doing painting again, and well, not again, for the first time actually. And that was the really the first time that was my gateway into the rest of what I would explore through uh, my other experiences in college. And I wouldn't even say that I can pin exactly what I am yet as an artist because I'm still in the process of exploring a lot of the different things. Like, for instance, this last semester, I took a collage and mixed media class, and that was a really interesting opportunity for me to experience a conceptually different kind of art because I was focused on a lot of illustration, a lot of anatomical studying. Not saying I'm perfect at it yet, but studying those specific things and trying to sharpen my skills in that. So moving into collage, which is more of a conceptual field, where even beyond abstract painting, I think you're not really trying to capture anything specific. You're kind of making these unique little environments. And after finishing that class, I was able to apply those concepts and those things, even though not visually and directly, at least on the conceptual level, I could bring that thinking into the different avenues that I was exploring as an artist, perhaps maybe in the more illustrative sense. Like, a lot of the portraits and anatomical drawings that I've been doing recently have been kind of capturing that more that structural and geometrical organization that I was developing in my time testing out
Mhm.
collages and stuff like that. So I would like to say that, though, as an artist, because I know I can kind of circle around the question forever and not really answer it, but to give an answer, I'd say that I like to focus on a vibrant color palette and I try to capture all elements of the color spectrum in every piece that I do as of now. And so I've been experimenting more with limiting myself with the palette as an exercise because what you learn as you use all of these different colors is that eventually it can become kind of stale to use every color all the time.
Mhm.
So limiting those options and actually limiting your palette becomes a form of novelty that I can kind of cultivate. So I guess exploring those two things has been something interesting. I like abstract and I like abstracting elements of capturing reality. So
Oh,
I would never say that I was a realist in any capacity. I will draw art that could be considered capturing elements of realism and anatomy and what could be considered proper elements of realism, but I always abstract some elements of it, whether that be the color sense or the backgrounds or something. I
mhm.
like to, at least in my artwork, elevate it beyond a level of capturing realness. Not to say that that art is less than that. It's just my way of approaching it, and that's it's a kind of cathartic experience to me too, because it's almost expressing my daily experiences, my emotional experiences through this kind of expressive medium.
Mhm.
And I think having all those options allows me to really capture the vocabulary that I want to kind of look back on and analyze.
So would you say that um, through these classes that you've taken, because I also want to ask if you have any, um, I guess from the beginning of your artistic career, did you have any instruction, or was it just you kind of saying, I'm going to start off copying, and then from there, once I had a good grasp of that, I'm going to expand to other arts, other grounds, and like I guess through this instruction, where along the line did this vibrant color pop of inspiration come from?
Uh, I can actually trace it back to one specific session in a painting class about during last semester. So I'd say a lot of my emergence as an artist or me discovering this journey towards what I think is developing my artistic language has it happened mainly in the past 4 years,
Oh,
even though I'm 20 years old now. So I've been drawing and I've been doing these artistic things for my whole life, but not in this capacity and level of commitment that I have in the past 4 years.
mhm.
So I'd say that the elements of the puzzle piece were always there, but I really started putting the pieces together in this like last most recent period in my life. And I kind of discovered I was getting really discouraged at the beginning because I never had formal art training or instructors teaching me how to do these things. So anything I was learning was basically on my own. And even when I entered school, I'm not at a studio art college. I'm at Boston College and I'm studying science there. So the classes that I was having more were about critiquing the things that were good about your work and what were things that were weak on, but a lot of it was about studio discussion and not really specific techniques. It was more about concept and theory and not because you I only really get to take one class of this each semester. I can't really devote all my time to it. So
Mhm.
I had to learn a lot of this on my own at a really fast pace. So I think I discovered my style by those specific limitations of my environment. And I think every artist kind of discovers their own specific language based on the specific context that they need to or want to create their art out of. And I remember I was never finishing my paintings in my figure painting class. And I started worrying that I was never going to be able to meet like the expectations that I was setting for myself in that class. So I started working in a faster style and focusing less on capturing the specific uh, details that were right in front of me and more elevating it to my own aesthetic sensibility in the fact that I was really abstracting the color palette that was in front of me. Like I wasn't capturing like flesh tones, whatever those might be. I was using really bright greens, bright yellows, bright reds, all together in this like kind of rainbow palette. I was focusing on trying to find like order in a chaotic aesthetic. It was all about finding order in chaos and kind of learning how to tiptoe that balance. And my development as an artist has kind of been controlling that balance better and using it more effectively and not having to think as much about it, just letting it happen naturally, almost so it's like instinctual. I'm sure a lot of musicians or other artists or anyone in a creative field can have that same experience where when you reach a level of mastership, like being a master, is when you don't really have to think about each movement or each uh, stroke of the brush as consciously. It's just kind of flowing through you, almost as if you're a medium for something else that's happening in like the world around you. And I haven't gotten there yet, but being able to try to cobble those steps together and have those experiences where I'm almost not in control of what I'm making is, I think, an important part of me growing as an artist.
Yeah, that's cool. And then I want to touch upon what you said about finding the order in the chaos. So I guess with because that's a very interesting topic, trying to find order within something that's super sporadic and almost non-ordical at all. Um, so when do you think that you really started? And I guess also, where do you get your inspiration from in formulating order out of chaos?
Uh, so it's such a tough question. The inspiration question is such a tough question because I feel like always you never want to limit yourself to a specific field of what is it called of inspirations because there are certain artists that inspire me in some ways and others that don't. Like certain artists, then their themes, their aesthetics, their principles and concepts, they're more apparent in my work rather than other artists. But I might say that those other artists were more influential to me than the ones that might seem more obvious in connection. So I feel like everyone can kind of draw their own interpretations from it. But just to answer the question simply, I feel like in terms of modern day art, I really obviously Basquiat is very important for me because the neo-expressionist movement I feel like was an interesting direction for art, but it is unfortunate to see a lot of his work get commodified in fashion culture nowadays. And I've seen so many brands use his logos just kind of in their work without paying any homage to his estate or anything like that. And because there's such little protection for his intellectual property because he was an artist that passed away when he was so young, his work can be kind of uh, commodified now. I know I used that term already, but it's just unfortunate to see that happen to a lot of artists that pass away when they're very young.
Mm-hmm.
But Dali was really important to me. Giacometti, I think, is important. Hyman Bloom, he's more of like an American abstract expressionist. Not like abstract expressionist, more of like he does figurative work, but with elements of abstract expressionism like infused into it in terms of color sense and the presentation of like form and figure and everything. He definitely presents the real world in an abstract way. And I'd say Hyman Bloom, out of all of them, is the one painter that really sparked my emergence as the specific kind of painting that I create now. And even as I try to develop my sense and maybe move away from some aspects of it, I'll always carry those things in that time that I spent cultivating that kind of aesthetic. I'll always carry that with me because I think even as you grow and change, you carry many echoes of the past with you, and no matter whether that's me changing as an artist or as a person or in other aspects, I feel like that's always the case. And I don't know. Warhol, I think, is conceptually an interesting figure. I don't think he's necessarily, like an artist that can be compared to people that have cultivated amazing, like painterly abilities, like let's say Picasso or Dali or Hyman Bloom or what's his name? Oh my God, I'm forgetting Rembrandt, something like that, or Monet or Van Gogh. I don't think he's necessarily on the painterly level of those figures, but I think he's an interesting figure in the art world because he challenged the art world not on the level of what he was creating, but he was a very meta kind of figure because he was making art about the art world and his place in it, and he was challenging the rules at the time. So it was very he was breaking the bounds of what was could be considered art. And although that kind of approach to art has been very redundant, especially in contemporary art and modern art nowadays, he was an important figure for the time because he did open those avenues, and did he was an important figure in pop culture and for shaping kind of many of the elements of the art community that it is today, whether those be positive or negative. I think because elements of pop art have become somewhat toxic in the art community, but I think other elements of it have also been really important to making art grow and become a wider and acceptable medium for everyone and to be more accessible, because it used to kind of be this stuffy elitist thing to be involved in the art community and to be into art. But now it's everyone usually can name some favorite artist off the top of their head, or say that they're interested in Da Vinci or Michelangelo or some other Renaissance painter. Like everyone can appreciate art in some aspect, in even though they may not be considered what used to be called high society or whatever. And I
Yeah.
think that is an important transition. And that's why I admire him kind of as a figure in making that cultural shift. But his art obviously is questionable at times, but it is funny. And I think that's why I admire him, because he really made fun of the abstract expressionist movement, for instance, which had artists like de Kooning, Pollock, and everyone like that, who I do admire, but also acknowledge that because their art was so abstract and non-literal, it created this school of critical thinkers that over-analyzed their work and tried gleaning completely unreasonable conclusions and theories that, like, they thought Pollock was making conclusions about society and everything like that. And there's this hilarious anecdote about Pollock when he came across a group of critics that were studying one of his paintings that was black and white, like splashes, and then there was a strike of red across it. And the critic, the one who was leading the discussion in a very like sophist kind of way, was explaining to all of his other critics how this red was representing something about society or like cultural shifts or something like that. And Pollock went up to them and was like, no, that was just, I was working on another painting and the red got onto the back of it. So it really showed how even the intention of the artist and his process had nothing to do with how it was received in the public. And I think it was interesting because Warhol kind of responded to that with this painting where he peed on a canvas covered in this oxide paper. So the urine would oxidize the paper and then make this green drips on it. And it was kind of like making fun of the overly intellectual, the overly esoteric and high society direction that the abstract movement was moving into, because the abstract expressionist movement developed out of a desire to kind of destroy the old world, and like because of the World War One destroyed everyone's perceptions of what art could be. So why do they need to stay in Renaissance art when Renaissance art wasn't capable of capturing the horrors and the atrocities of the world at that time, because World War One was so incredibly awful, and it had all these images and scenes of terror that couldn't be realistically portrayed. It needed a new kind of language, and thus like surrealism, abstract expressionism, impressionism, all these new languages developed out of the need to convey this changing world. And a lot of it meant that poorer people could become very famous artists, even though their work might not become popular in their lifetime, like Van Gogh is the biggest example of that. But nonetheless, they could still become very famous artists, even though they weren't matriculated in this higher society that was very prominent during like Renaissance culture and everything. But just like the Renaissance, it started moving in the direction of only super rich people and their art critic friends would have access to the opinions, the theories, and the concepts that were being discussed. And a lot of the times, the art discussion moved out of the hands of the artists themselves and into like high society, like dinner parties, art parties, and all these like penthouse discussions and everything like that. And soon enough, it wasn't about the art anymore. It was back to being about elitism and about the mighty dollar that was running the art community.
Mhm.
So I think it's interesting how I think every kind of art movement responds to that, because over time, every art movement adopts that elitism, because an art movement emerges as a response, as a radical response to the status quo. And then as that radical movement becomes the status quo, they soon must be impeached by something else. And thus the cycle continues. So I think everyone always is like, art is becoming stale. There's not going to make anything. Art is dead. But I think that's kind of ridiculous to say, because we're living in our own time and we can't see the whole elephant. We're standing too close to it. We need to take a step back and look at all of history and see that there's always been a new movement that's emerged. There's always been art that has been created to reflect the realities of our time. And I don't think there's ever going to be a shortage of people coming up with things to respond to our environment, because it's always changing. We're having new technology come out every day. Where more people are born every minute. Our society is exponentially growing on every single level imaginable. So there's new challenges and new developments and new miracles that we have to respond to. And art is always going to be a uniquely human expression to respond to those like amazing parts of our reality, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree. I definitely think that, especially with the perception of art, it's very interesting to think of it in terms of like how art is supposed or was viewed as a very elitist. Only those who understand it can appreciate it and should, who can pay the money to go and appreciate it, should be the ones taking it into it and like taking it in. However, like you said, with the piece of painting with the red stroke, sometimes you just got to take a step back, like you said, and just appreciate it for what it is, not
Yeah.
try to impose some super extra, like extra meaning that's
Mm,
supposed to be on it instead of just appreciating for what it is.
exactly.
Yeah. And then, so kind of touching upon some of the points you said, I know that you do a lot of clothing as well. So I wanted
Yeah.
to ask, if you think that there's a difference in the presentation of art on clothing versus, let's say, a canvas or a print.
I definitely have to say that well, my approach to making clothing is definitely different than the way other people might do it, because a lot of my work that I make specifically for my studio art setting, I end up just readapting into a fashion setting. But there's also things that I make specifically for clothing. And so, but my approach to it is certainly different because for when I'm just making art, I'm doing that for myself. And if I can happen to maybe one day have some like gallery or museum or some art collector be interested enough to take time to see to make notice of my art, then that would just be a nice side benefit. But I'm always going to make art just for myself because it's important to me. But when I'm making these fashion related things, I'm viewing that more as like a source of like income, even though I enjoy that process. I have to understand that the products that I'm making are more of a commodity than the art pieces and other works that I do on in the studio. So my conceptual approach to it certainly is different because if no one likes the paintings that I make, I honestly could not care less. It would really make me happy if people did enjoy them, but it's not about that for me because I can look back on a lot of my paintings and not like them aesthetically and still look at them and see their importance and their value to me as a catalyst for expressing a certain aspect of myself at a certain point in my lifetime.
Hmm.
And I can always look at that and see how it's important. But for like a hoodie or a piece of like or for pants, like if I'm painting pants for someone, I need to make sure that they like them because it's not about me wearing it, it's about someone else wanting to make them liking it enough to make sure that they can wear it out in public and be proud that they're wearing it. And because if they don't do that, then they're wasting their money and they wasted my time, their time, and then the whole transaction becomes meaningless. So I really have to take notice more the of the person on the other end of the art transaction in terms of my fashion approach. And I'm sure if for people that do commissioned artworks and commissioned paintings, they probably have that experience of having to make something in the vision of someone that's providing them the finances and thus also providing them the concepts and the direction that they want their artist to move in. So where I'm at as an artist is obviously a specific experience that I can't project across all artists, but I think that's probably the distinction that I'm experiencing right now, that I have to think more about, do I like this, but is everyone gonna like this? And is or are enough or am I or is this gonna be not everyone, because obviously you can't make everyone happy. Everyone is too broad of a term. So to kind of correct myself, I guess, uh to reach the is are the designs and the products that I'm making for fashion related endeavors, are they connecting with enough people in the target audience that I want to connect with in order to make sure that my voice is reaching people? And I don't want to make it sound like it's too much of a paper chase right now, because in all honesty, I haven't sold that many things. I've definitely sold product before, but I'm not moving like these big companies or anything like that. I'm still at a low level of production and low level of sales relative to a lot of bigger companies. But I think obviously while I have to focus on the business, which is something I don't have to do for a lot of other art related things, focusing on the business me also motivates me to continue to make good things, to make sure that I'm up to a good enough standard where people are not only gonna, because I would rather I want people I want to be proud of my own work. I don't want to be people to be out there buying things that I would look at back on later and be like, "Oh, I could have put more time and effort into making that." And now they're going to walk around and I'm always going to think to myself that I could have made it better. And obviously, they're not going to be worrying about that, but as an artist, that is a tendency that I'll bring into even something a more business related venture. So,
Yeah, and it's kind of like I kind of see it as some people think of it as like there's the money that's involved, but it also in terms of just like the artistry, it's also a another source of like encouragement, like a goal to work towards. Like, yes, I'm making this. Does it give me enjoyment? Yes. But now, is it going to give someone else enjoyment with that purpose in mind? So it's another really cool way to to inspire yourself to work harder and to make sure that you're putting out your best work. It's like another checkpoint, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think as I develop as an artist in the studio, I think I've also changed as an artist in terms of my fashion interests. Like I've gotten to collaborate with a lot of really interesting people on and great people in the Instagram community and like other artists that can do things and have access to materials and machinery that I don't physically have access to or have the financial capabilities to get access to yet. So collaboration has been a really great way for me to expand my interests. Like for my most important project in terms of transitioning as a fashion related artist was making a painting over the summer, then getting that painting transferred onto a blanket print, and then having that blanket sewn into a hoodie. And that was like a really interesting project because I actually got to. It wasn't like the experience that I had up to that point, which had been make a design, clean it up digitally, and then put it onto a pre-existing template on some other website who hosts the domain and everything like that. I really got to see my artwork come alive in a way that I had not been able to do before because it was the materials, the choice of materials was really the thing that elevated for it because it was so interesting being able to work with such like a heavier, such a different textured material because you don't have those options when you don't when you go through these sites like Shopify and Printful and Teespring and stuff like that. Not to take away from them, but there's simply not that diversity and there's not the same diversity in approaches as I have access to when I reach out to people in the art community and especially the online art community who have the ability to embroider things, to print things onto certain fabrics that I literally am unable to do. So my imagination and my vision can really kind of go wild, and I think that's although there are many obviously bad things that have come with the age of the internet, like misinformation and all that other kind of crazy stuff as the time we're living in. I think that in my experience has been something that I'm really thankful for, that I have such a wide network of people that I can communicate with that I couldn't even imagine having access to in uh, my immediate life if I didn't have these resources. So uh, definitely working with other people and finding modern day inspiration because I want to make sure that, you know, paying people's dues while they're still with us and everything, because I think it's so easy to look at artists that have been dead for like 100 years and be like, oh, they were so great, they did this and this and this, but because those things that they did became the foundations for what is being done in present time. And but a lot of times people that are doing radical things during their time aren't accepted because those norms later become accepted. And so I think paying, you know, even kind of holding people to the level of artists that maybe have been in the past, because there's this idea, especially in music as well too, it's especially prevalent in music, that music of the past is always better than the music. Like, oh, I remember music in the 70s, blah blah blah. I remember music in like the 50s and or even the 80s for some people, and like, you know, or of any time period. There's always people being like music black back then is better than the music now. And I think because it's easy to kind of be comfortable in what has already been established rather than really trying to dig your feet in to what is being done and what is pushing the envelope in current time, because I think it's much safer to kind of just fall back into those accepted uh, archetypes for whatever creative field, whether that be poetry, music, or art or paint or whatever field, honestly.
Yeah, there's honestly something very special with music, with art, with anything, with taking it out of the context of what is everyone going to think about it now, and just letting it be itself. And at some point, one way or another, it will be appreciated, and just letting it exist as is. There's something really, truly freeing and special about that. I
Yeah, absolutely. Because I don't know what's to say that someone who's great right now, because I mean, I see this all the because YouTube is probably my primary media for just like watching content, online content and stuff like that. So in comment sections, especially on music related videos, I see all the time, like, oh wow, this guy is amazing. He's basically like the Beethoven or like the Bach, or the comparison to some very old like composer, or like a classical musician or so, or like he's the Stravinsky or something like that. And then there's always a reply saying like, no, there's no way you can surpass that. They're like the best. And but I don't think it's outlandish to think that someone in our current time could be surpassing a level that was, or a pinnacle that was reached in some past time, because humans are always evolving artistically, technologically, socially, culturally, economically. We're always progressing upwards, we're always developing. So what's to say that someone now isn't more amazing than someone back then? So I think making sure that you are paying attention and being present in those artistic realities is like an important part of being who I am as an artist, and hope to continue to hold with me as I develop, honestly.
Definitely, yeah. And then finally, I wanted to ask, what's something that you wish you knew when you first started making art, or something that you could tell yourself once you started, whether it be when you started at the age of 5 or when you started to take things a little bit more seriously than you thought you would?
That's such a tough question. It's such a tough question because I feel like I haven't settled in enough yet as an artist to be able to be like, you should do X and X things or XYZ things, because I'm still in the process of discovering. But uh I guess just being open to really making mistakes and just admitting that maybe you admitting that certain things that you don't like are okay not to like them. Like, it's really important for me now to accept certain things that uh or to look back on art that I may not be very fond of and yet accept it for what it is, and not completely reject it or want to burn it or destroy it or something like that. I think embracing it as a reality of something that I created as a moment to capture a experience and a time in my life is an important reality of where I'm at. And uh, because it gives me a clear perspective on my growth and to see that development, because it's interesting to parallel the chronology of my artwork next to what is I consider like the timeline of my life, and to see how they go together and to see the correlations between the two, and to see how I used art as a way to reflect my experiences and to kind of, and sometimes it may not be your reflection time, sometimes it may refract it and distort aspects of it and completely abstract whatever thing was happening in my life at that time, or whatever thing I was imagining or trying to judge or speak on or simply capture, like on a purely aesthetic level. I think even if I failed to do certain things or made mistakes, I now I'm able to see how important they are. Not even just accept them, but to see their importance. Because one thing that I learned, especially so in, like, did a psychobiology of emotional learning class this year, because I'm a neuroscience major and studio art major at my school. So I think it's an interesting connection between those two things, how thinking, emotion, cognition, and all these specially and uniquely human experiences kind of connect with this uniquely human expression, which is art, and how those two worlds connect. But uh what I learned is that failure is like so much more important and so much more informative to human experience than success ever can be. Because when you succeed, it's highly possible that you did that completely by accident. But when you mess up and you fail, you know you did something wrong, and and at least if you're paying attention and you're really soaking in those failures, that you know what not to do in the future. And that's far more important, because you can move in a new direction, which means you can grow. But if you keep guessing and getting lucky and doing all these things just by chance, then you can just wade in this pool of ambiguity forever as an artist and never really know if you're progressing or moving in any direction at all. And I think it's more painful than anything any artist can experience, can kind of empathize with this experience, that it's more painful than anything to stagnate. Nothing is more painful than just being completely unable to express anything new and just being in this muck of unoriginality of ideas as an artist. Even if I'm completely doing something that I don't like, I am willing to explore those artistic uh not tendencies, inclinations now. And because maybe while I'm messing up, I find something that's really good. It's kind of like jazz. It's really like the act of improvisation, and sometimes the music is inaudible and you can't even understand what's going on. But then suddenly enough something emerges, like from that chaos, something sprouts that is really beautiful and really captures a truly palpable feeling that people can relate to or really connect with. And that really is the truest language that an artist can reach with people, so much more than their words or anything else can honestly do. And so, because what an artist displays in the gallery is not what the artist has made over their whole career.
Mhm.
In their closet is probably hundreds of paintings that they would never want to display in a gallery because they know that there are things wrong with them, and yet they still have them because they know how important they were and they know how essential they were to building the foundations of who they are as an artist. And no matter how amazing you've become, you're going to continue to add to those collection of failed paintings because no one's ever become the best. And the idea of becoming the best is death for an artist, because stagnation is death for an artist. And you can never be the best. And whenever artists ask, unless you're like a complete egomaniac and narcissist, a lot of really good artists, when they're asked like do they feel like they're the best at something, or a lot of really good athletes that are asked are they the best at something, they they avoid answering the question, or they get uncomfortable because they don't want to be like, yeah, because they want to get better too. They're not happy. If they really care about what they're doing, they're not happy with where they are. They want to continue to improve. And implying that there's the best, that means it's a stopping point and there's no change from there. And life really isn't like that at all. The people are always kind of changing. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's
I
my
love that.
little rant on that.
No, dude, I love that. That's applicable to anything. It's half the battle to growth, to understanding, and just like so many new perspectives that you can have. But I just want to say thank you so much. This has been an
Yeah,
incredible
thanks, man.
interview. You have a
No, thank you for
super
having me.
interesting mind. Um,
Appreciate that. Thanks
and
for having me. I don't know, these are kind of fun. Like I always worry how I'm going to be